We have made it to the final review video of these series, and we're marking it by hitting 6,000 subscribers on the channel too. So thank you so much for all of your support. Today, it's finally time to talk about Europe's finest musical institution. That's Una Voce per San Marino. Firstly, we have some Girlbop cleaning up to do, so we're going to go to Austria and Georgia first. If you haven't already, before we start, make sure you subscribe to the channel, make sure you have notifications on so you don't miss a single video. You can follow me and my editor Jay on Twitter, and you can follow me on Instagram too. We are already thinking ahead to next year, and we really want to do more videos like the one we did in February at UMK, but those are expensive and we can't do them without support. So please, if you can, head on over to the Patreon, and as a thank you, we'll give you videos a day early there too. With all that out the way, it's time to talk about Austria. This year, they've selected Colleen with her song, We Will Rave. Colleen is actually an artist with a pretty hefty Eurovision history, albeit not a particularly usual one. For those who don't know, in the run-up to the contest, there are stand-in rehearsals. These rehearsals take place so that the host broadcaster can prepare lighting, can prepare staging, can prepare camera angles to the maximum possible extent before the artists arrive. This means that they can use their very limited rehearsal time for other things. In 2018, Colleen was one of those stand-ins, and as a result, we have grainy footage of her performing Fuego by Eleni Ferreira and Monsters by Sara Alto. She did also get a brief moment on TV during the flag parade. As for We Will Rave, it is Colleen's first release on a major label, but she did release an album previously under a label that she herself founded. Unfortunately for Colleen, this song did not have the best start in life. This suffered one of the biggest and earliest leaks we have seen in Eurovision in recent years. Not only was the song leaked, but the entire performance, the choreo, live vocals, the lot from Austria's internal national final was leaked. The broadcaster makes a feed available to jurors who are looking at everything remotely. This meant that somebody could, and indeed did, screen record the entire thing. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and we had a leak from this national final last year as well. So hopefully the Austrian broadcaster will now take action to stop it from happening again. As for the song itself, we have to start with the bad news. That is that this is written by my arch enemy himself, Jimmy Joker Thornfelt. The good news is that while he is yet to pay for his other crimes, this song is actually quite good. It is, however, maybe a little bit out of place in 2024, and I've been trying to think of a way to elaborate this, and I think I found one. Firstly, here is a snippet from a song that was on the soundtrack for FIFA 2001. Now, here is a snippet of the bridge from We Will Rave. I'm just saying, this would fit amazingly into an early 2000s sports game. I actually played FIFA 2001 a whole lot as a kid, but my favorite feature was, for some reason, if the opposition goalkeeper had the ball in his hands, you could just run up to him and slide tackle. Obviously, it immediately got you a red card, but as a 4-year-old, I thought that was absolutely hilarious. The key thing that I'm trying to show here is that We Will Rave depends on a type of sound that is very much associated with the 90s and with the 2000s. It's the kind of tropes that most people are going to associate with dance music, with techno music from that time period. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. What it does mean, however, is that some people are going to find this dated and aren't going to engage with it as well as a result. Hardcore Eurofans, meanwhile, will absolutely eat this up because, come on, we might as well admit to ourselves, this is the kind of thing we absolutely love. We proved this when we sent this to number one on the Eurovision scoreboard app within hours of it being released. I am not exempt from this because I'm going to be fully honest and say I really love this song. It's catchy, it's delightfully camp, and most importantly, it's totally unapologetic about what it is. It's a catchy dance pop song, it's straight down the line, and it's not pretending to be anything it's not. To be honest, when I look at the styling of this song, the flamboyant and eye-catching outfits that Colleen has been wearing to every single pre-party, and the music video packed full of gratuitous shots of mostly naked men, I start to think that Colleen built this song in a lab specifically to appeal to hardcore Eurovision fans. Speaking of the music video, that was actually one of the sources of drama for this when it was released, because unfortunately for Colleen, the company that she had contracted to produce the video was late and missed the deadline to get the project finished. The song came out on the 1st of March, but the music video didn't drop until 3 days later. As for how the song will do at Eurovision, I am going to try and put the Eurofan bias aside and shoot straight on this one. I'm aware the influences around me in the community are going to make me feel especially predisposed to enjoying this kind of thing. Within its semi-final, I'm feeling pretty good about its chances. I don't think it's going to have a problem qualifying. While there are other songs that you can make an argument kind of encroach on the same territory as this, I don't think there's a really good match. You could argue that maybe the drum and bass of Switzerland is somewhat approaching the same influences, but they're in totally different contexts. In terms of other pop songs that could come towards maybe taking some votes from this, you could maybe make an argument for Georgia, but I'm going to talk more about that song in a minute, and I don't think this is going to impact either of them particularly negatively. What this means is, as I said, it's going to qualify, and I think it's going to do it comfortably. That means we can start talking about how high up the scoreboard Colleen could get in the final. We know that Colleen can sing this song live, and as we saw when she finished her performance at London Eurovision Party, despite the fact her top had broken and she was literally holding it together to prevent herself from flashing the entire audience. Top marks for doing a full choreo and dance break, by the way, in the midst of all of that. Point is, it shows she's a really accomplished performer, and for that reason, I think we can trust her to get the most potential out of this song. There is a limiting factor for me, and unfortunately, that is the style of the song. Like I said, it's right up my street, but I think a lot of people are going to maybe find it dated and not engage with it in the way that I have. For that reason, I don't think we're looking at a top 10 finisher here. There is every chance it could squeak onto the left-hand side of the scoreboard, maybe 12th, maybe 13th. But at the very least, I think we'll see it in the top 20. This is not going to be a flop, and it's certainly making it to a decent placing. Before we move on, I do just want to mention now, I got the opportunity to speak to Colleen myself at London Eurovision Party. You can see that interview and a number of others over on the ESC United YouTube channel, so make sure and go subscribe there if you haven't already. We're moving swiftly on to Georgia and Nutsa Puzeladze, who I actually also interviewed at LEP with her song Firefighter. We have a few songs trying to wear the Fuego shoes this year and conquer Europe with a female-led pop banger. Perhaps most notably, we have Cilia Capsis from Cyprus. But I'm going to front up with this one and say that this song completely blows Liar away, as well as pretty much everything else in a similar category. Perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised, given that the songwriter behind this is the same songwriter who wrote Loco Loco by Hurricane, which was the Serbian entry from 2021. But either way, I imagine the Cypriot delegation were probably pretty annoyed when this was revealed. Nutsa actually tried to represent Georgia at Eurovision once before in 2017, but finished second. Keep the Faith by Tako Gachachaladze was the entry that made it to the contest that year. She filled up the 6 years in between by entering a whole bunch of competitions. She was mentored by Hadis, who participated in Eurovision 2009 on The Voice of Turkey. She also entered the Russian show Muka Vsyo Vmeste, that's a little bit awkward now, twice in 2020 and 2021. Most notably, she made the top 12 on American Idol last year. You do see quite a few Eurovision acts who have emerged from this talent show circuit in the last few years, and while I know some people aren't too comfortable with it, I have less of a problem with it than I think some others do. There is no denying that it produces performers who are accustomed to the kinds of pressures that you find in an environment like Eurovision. As a musician, being judged against your peers is something that is super unusual and super uncomfortable as well. So this kind of past experience can be really invaluable when managing all of the emotions that arise from that. There is a reason that this exactly is something that I ask most Eurovision artists and most national final artists when I'm interviewing them. It's one of the toughest things to adjust to when you enter into that Eurovision bubble, that you're going to be judged against other artists who are often doing things that are radically different to you. I think it's really important from a fan perspective to pull the curtain back on this and to help people understand just how much pressure the artists feel and how difficult it can be to exist in that kind of environment. I'm going to pull this tangent in a little bit and talk more about the song itself, because that is why we're here. What really impresses me about Firefighter is the way that this song comes alive on stage. It's no exaggeration to say that at London Eurovision Party, Nutsa was one of the highlights of the night against pretty stiff competition. That came down to two things. Firstly, the fact that the song allows for a vocalist to really shine if it's used correctly. Secondly, because Nutsa took that chance and ran with it. She sounded absolutely exceptional that night, and everyone around me agreed. We mentioned Hadis before, and you can definitely feel a style similarity to her entry from 2009, Dum Tek Tek. That said, this isn't a sound that feels 15 years old. In fact, it feels pretty fresh. Sure, we know this kind of song has been done before, but at least in a Eurovision context, it doesn't feel like it has aged all that much. This might be to do with the fact that I think for a large portion of the general public, this is the kind of music that is stereotypically associated with Eurovision, at least in Western European countries. But regardless of the reasoning, the fact that it doesn't feel dated, of course, helps Nutzer immensely. I have other reasons to be optimistic as well. I mean, I don't think we're following the trajectory that Iru faced last year, where all the early hype ended up in a failure to qualify. The reason I don't think we're going that way is because this song doesn't have the nonsense lyrics, no more thing is known this year, and most importantly, we don't have the underwhelming staging that Iru ended up saddled with. I'll hold my hands up and say Georgia was a big miss for me last year, because when I was predicting, based on the rehearsals, who would qualify, I predicted that Georgia would come third in the semi-final, which obviously proved to be extremely inaccurate. Hindsight is 2020, and I do understand why it didn't qualify now. That staging was really underwhelming. That's why it's reassuring that Nutzer has her own creative team working on this. We're not going to end up in a situation where you have that static, uncreative staging that was involved last year. As a result, this is a pretty comfortable qualifier in my opinion, and I think it could have a really, really high ceiling. If the staging is right for this and the vocals are as good as we know it could be, we could seriously see this as the breakthrough hit that suddenly bursts onto people's radars during rehearsals. This happens every single year. We saw it with Fuego as the perfect example, and this in many ways employs a lot of the same tropes that Fuego did. To close off this section, I do just want to tell one personal story about Nutzer from LEP. Before I go any further, don't worry, it's a nice thing. I was accredited press at LEP for ESC United, and we approached Nutzer's team and asked for an interview when she was doing her tour of the press room, and she said yes. While they were working through their list of interviews, they ran out of time just before us. They had to go and do their sound check. She and her team promised to return afterwards to do our interview, but having seen what pre-parties are like behind the scenes and how hectic and stressful they are, I would have completely understood, and I wouldn't have been annoyed whatsoever had they not come back. Just being honest, these things are so exhausting that sometimes you make a promise like that, you can't fulfill it. If that had happened, I would not have minded whatsoever. This was particularly true at London Eurovision Party as well, because there was a flight cancellation that meant the acts coming in from Barcelona arrived much later than planned, and the sound checks as a result were running very considerably behind schedule. With Nutzer in particular, given that she's in the process of grieving the sudden and tragic loss of her brother in an accident recently, I think it's admirable that she's doing the pre-parties at all, let alone giving interviews to people like me. Because of that, I really appreciated the effort that her and her team made to come back to the press room after the sound check to speak to us. They came back, they sought us out, and they made the time to give us an interview for a few minutes. It's this kind of thing that shows you that somebody and their team understands the contest and understands the community around it and wants to embrace it. I wanted to share that with you because for those of you who are fans of Firefighter, I think it probably will add something to know that this is somebody who really deeply, clearly cares about the contest, who cares about the fans, the community, and that's a really amazing thing to see. I know it makes it more difficult to analyze songs properly when I have this kind of emotional investment, but on a personal experience, having met Nutzer and met her team, I now find myself really, really rooting for Georgia at Eurovision, and I hope they get the great result that they deserve. On that very positive note, it's time to move on, and we're going to finally talk about the greatest musical event that Europe has ever produced. That's right, it's time to talk about Una Voce per San Marino. If I had more time, I could have done a whole mini iceberg on this national final alone. Unfortunately, we're now scrambling to get all the videos done before I go to Malmö, and that's only a week away, so we're gonna have to change up the approach slightly. For those of you who don't know, anyone can enter Una Voce per San Marino, and 140 acts get put through to their semi-finals. Of those 140, you have all kinds of oddball characters, deluded Eurofans, people with more money than sense, the works, and we're going to talk about a few of them. Before we do, in a bizarre twist of fate, this year's representatives for Spain, Nebulosa, actually auditioned for Una Voce per San Marino last year, and they didn't even make it into those semi-finals. They were rejected at the audition stage. Conversely, last year's Benidorm Fest finalists Megara did audition for Una Voce per San Marino this year and did do very well, but we'll talk about them in a minute. So while we can't possibly go through all 140, yep, I didn't misspeak, 140 semi-finalists, I do think the best way to explain the show is maybe by reflecting on some of the highlights. With that, we are going to start strong with the incredible, the unstoppable Loco Boombox.
To the right, 2, 3, 4, salta. Cha cha cha, arriba, abajo, al centro, pa' dentro, one more round.
Where on earth do I start with this? Okay, so this is honestly why I ranked this show in A tier of national finals when I did my first video on the channel about that very theme 6 months ago. Nowhere else in Europe will you find a Spanish man with silly glasses and a beard yelling an aerobics routine at you over a synth that is very clearly the same one used in I Can't Get Enough by Depeche Mode. I also have a great many questions about this outfit, which is showing a little bit too much in the crotch area. I'm going to curtail this line of questioning on the basis that at some point I'm going to have to declare to YouTube that this video is safe for advertisers. I feel that may be about to get compromised in this section. I will close off my praise of Loco Boombox with a horrifying admission. When I listened to the studio version of this song to prepare for this video, I actually quite enjoyed it. Like, it's so ridiculous and terrible that it kind of just becomes high art. I'm not sure if Loco Boombox realized this would happen, but this is going to be burned into my brains for weeks now. And if any of you go to listen to this song after this video, it's going to be burned into your brain too. Be warned now, if you choose to keep moving forward, that's what the consequences are going to be. Loco Boombox may not have escaped the semi-finals, but he has earned a place in our hearts. Godspeed, Senor Boombox. From the weird to the weirder, let's talk about the next song, which is The Last Polar Bear by Dana Gillespie.
I'm just a polar bear who's trying to survive, who's hoping to just stay alive.
This song was generated by AI. No, I'm not kidding. The organizers of Una Voce per San Marino, in collaboration with an AI music firm called Kasperaki, ran a mini selection of AI-generated songs, with the winner getting a direct pass to the final of the selection. This was what won it. Let's have a little look at the beautiful, emotional, the powerful lyrics of The Last Polar Bear. When I look back through the years, I never had these kind of fears. I lived my life dancing in the snow. Now I wonder, where did it go? I'm just a polar bear who's trying to survive, who's hoping to just stay alive. Tell me, is there anyone out there who might have mercy on a polar bear? In all seriousness, what's crazier than having an AI song in the national selection is who was ended up singing it. Dana Gillespie was a frequent collaborator and sometime backing vocalist for David Bowie, and she was the original Mary Magdalene in the London production of Jesus Christ Superstar. She's recorded 13 albums in Sanskrit in honor of the Indian guru Sri Satya Sai Baba, and organizes a yearly blues festival in the Caribbean, which has featured acts like Mick Jagger. It kind of feels like Dana has completed all of the main quests of life and now is just kind of picking off whatever side quests she wants. And you know what? I'm kind of here for it. Good luck to Dana, because all of this coming together produced one of the most entertaining packages of the national final season, and I absolutely loved it. It was completely iconic, completely terrible, 10 out of 10, no notes. You'd think that things couldn't get any more bizarre than this. Well, you'd be wrong. After the San Marino Music Festival, which is an Italian music festival that also doubles as the mechanism for the country to pick its Eurovision entry, the organizers of the San Marino selection had a bright idea. Italian music legend Loredana Berti had just placed 7th in San Remo with her song Pazza.
Io sono pazza di me e voglio gridarlo ancora.
At the 11th hour, the organisers of Una Voce per San Marino invited Loredana to come and participate in the show, and she accepted. Her motivations, according to her, mostly centred around the fact that she wanted to go to Eurovision, specifically in Sweden, in order to annoy her Swedish ex-husband, who, as it happens, is multiple Grand Slam winning tennis champion Bjorn Borg. Loredana has released more than 25 albums and has accolades and hit songs and platinum records coming out of her ears. Given the organisers had gone out of the way to invite her to the show, many people rightfully suspected that it was a bit of a done deal before a note had been sung. We assumed it would be the end of the story and Loredana would represent San Marino at the contest this year. What the competition considered to be big artists were given a bye to the final anyway, so that in itself wasn't suspicious. What was suspicious was the fact it happened so last minute. Like I said, the net result of this was that people thought it was over before it began. It didn't quite work out like that, but to explain how, I'm going to have to introduce the final song of this segment. Earlier, I spoke about Megara and their efforts last year in Benidorm Fest. They participated in Una Voce per San Marino this year with their song 1111. This year has been quite the journey for Megara, and if nothing else, their story is a testament to not giving up when someone says no, and to keep pushing on the doors until one opens. Like I said, they participated in Benidorm Fest with the song Arcadia last year, and that was one of my favourite songs of the season. Realistically, if you give Eurovision fans an electronic rock song with robotic lesbians on stage during the performance, you're probably onto a winner. This song, 1111, was also intended for Benidorm Fest, but the organisers of that show turned them down. Instead, Megara went to San Marino and competed in the semi-finals. Here they hit another hurdle. They didn't win the semi-final and ended up in the second chance round. They came through that second chance round and so would get their opportunity to perform on the big stage in the final. It is widely accepted that winning from a second chance round is naturally a very difficult thing to do. In addition to that, they were facing an overwhelming audience favourite in the form of Loredana Berti, and even though they weren't able to vote, it seemed inevitable to everyone that this would be where the story ended and they would not make it to the contest. Except that's not what happened. I remember this moment so well because I was in Manchester at a Eurovision pub night. In fact, it was the same night that I did Nendes Narkotikumidest et Teme Kulmendagi on karaoke, and I should post the full video on Twitter at some point of that. That's besides the point though. We were huddled around a phone, waiting for this show to end, waiting for Loredana to have her crowning moment. Then, having invited Loredana Berti into Una Voce per San Marino, brought her up on stage and stood her alongside this Spanish band that no one in San Marino had ever heard of before. The jury, which was different to the jury that judged the semi-finals, gave the winning ticket to Megara. This put the icing on the cake of the funniest possible national final in Eurovision history. Nothing is ever going to top this. We haven't even mentioned the fact that Italy's 1997 participants, Jalise, won the San Marino Outlet Experience Award for Best Look, only to not be presented with the trophy because they'd already buggered off home before it was presented. Loredana, meanwhile, to her credit, took to Twitter and actually addressed her defeat in very good humour. She jokingly suggested that there was a friend of Bjorn Borg's on the jury who was clearly trying to stop her from going to Sweden. I have to say, credit to Loredana for being such a good sport about this. I suppose I should close off this segment by talking about my opinion of San Marino's chances at the contest, so I'll do that now briefly. I really like this song, and I'm a particular fan of the flamenco breakdown in the bridge, which has the potential to be a real moment. At the same time, as always, it's going to be a tough ride for the ironically named Most Serene Republic. Sadly, I think they may just fall short this year, and that's not a detriment to the quality of Megara, it is a testament to the quality of the semi-final that they are in. It's not a done deal, and they could just sneak through, and the reason why I am holding out some hope here is that we know Megara can do a live performance, and we saw at Benidorm Fest last year, they know how to sell a song. Personally, I'm going to have my fingers crossed for them that they're able to do that in Malmö. With that, we've made it to the end of this series. Thank you all so much for watching, especially those who have watched all 11 parts. If you haven't watched them yet, you can go back and watch them all. They will all still be there. Like I said before, within a week of this video being published, I'm going to be in Malmö, and you can see everything that I'm getting up to there on the ESC United YouTube channel. Make sure to go and subscribe if you haven't already. In the meantime, I have 2 more videos to write, film, and edit before I go, so I'd best get on with it. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for joining me on this journey through all of Eurovision 2024's entries, and I look forward to seeing you in Malmö. Take care.